After losing the trial, Serena walked away with her daughter in tears, having nothing. But when her hand was suddenly grabbed by a dirty, frightened boy, she could never have imagined what lay ahead. Serena sat at a long, polished table in the stuffy courtroom, her fingers gripping her knees so tightly that her nails dug into her skin. Hundreds of cases like hers, dry, emotionless, foreign proceedings. Beside her, the board's senior secretary mechanically took notes of the session. Across from her, Mark, calm, composed, as though he were at a business meeting rather than a courtroom. His gray eyes showed nothing, no anger, no regret. Serena glanced around the room. A few outsiders, some had come out of curiosity, others had just ended up there by chance. But she felt as though everyone was looking at her with judgment. The court has ruled. The judge lifted his eyes and looked at her with a faint weariness. His voice was even, emotionless. The jointly acquired property will be divided as follows. The car and country house remain with the defendant, as they were purchased by his parents. The housing issue is resolved in favor of the defendant. The plaintiff will receive personal belongings, a television, a refrigerator. Custody of the minor child is transferred. She wasn't even surprised. It was all heading in this direction. She looked at Mark. He didn't even flinch, didn't try to object, offer something in exchange, at least for their daughter. This arrangement was perfectly fine for him. Nothing can be changed, flashed in her mind. The judge continued speaking, but Serena no longer listened. The buzzing in her ears drowned out the words, and her thoughts tangled. That was it. 12 years of marriage. Years she had considered happy. And in the end, court, and different papers, a signature agreeing to give up her daughter. She looked at Mark again, but he was no longer looking at her. He was signing documents without a second thought. Giving up the child. His own daughter. Serena involuntarily squeezed her eyes shut. How could someone so easily renounce their own child? The room fell silent. Is that all? Mark finally asked, as if he had just concluded negotiations, not betrayed his family. Yes. The session is over, the judge nodded curtly. Serena couldn't get up right away. Her legs felt like lead. Rachel, her friend, took her by the elbow. Let's go. Serena nodded, feeling how her body moved automatically while her mind seemed to be stuck back in the courtroom. What now? To the street. She took a deep breath of the cold air and realized she no longer had a home. She and Mark had rented an apartment together, but now her life had shrunk to the size of a suitcase, waiting in Rachel's car. But there was one place where someone was waiting for her. Her childhood home. The small village cabin left behind by her parents. Serena looked at Alice. The 10-year-old girl stood next to her, holding her mother's hand, trying to smile, though she didn't fully understand what was happening. Serena squeezed her fingers in response. We'll manage, she told herself. But her heart was doubtful. At the suburban train station, there was the smell of coffee and dampness. People were hurrying, dragging heavy bags, bustling near the ticket counters, talking, creating a muffled background noise like the hum of bees. Serena stood by the ticket counter, tightly holding a worn travel bag in one hand and her daughter's palm in the other. The last train to her hometown was leaving in 40 minutes. Mom, are we going to stay there for a long time? Alice quietly asked, looking up at her. Serena lowered her gaze to her daughter. There was no anxiety in her voice, only a slight curiosity. She didn't yet understand the full extent of the changes. Home, sweetheart, she whispered. For a long time. The word home sounded strange. Home, had it ever really been a home to her? When she closed her eyes, she remembered her parents' cabin, old, with dark wooden walls smelling of resin. It had been abandoned for years, and Serena had no idea what condition it was in. How many years had it been since she'd been there? 16? 20? Serena was only 5 years old when her parents took her far away, to the hot, sun-drenched place. There were doctors devoted to their profession, and the assignment seemed like another step toward something important. Long streets with white houses, the scents of pomegranates and peaches, thick black tea with sugar, all of it was forever imprinted in her childhood memory. And also, a woman with dark hair and a warm gaze. She was the landlady of the house where they rented a place, kind, strict, caring. Little Serena loved sitting beside her, watching her bake lavash in the hot oven. But then came the disease. The cholera epidemic. Her parents rushed to save people, didn't think of themselves, didn't notice the first symptoms. When they were gone, Serena was too young to understand what had happened. She just waited for her mom and dad to return. But they never did. They sent her back to America. A long train journey. Should she cry? There were no tears. She just looked out the window as the sun above the mountains changed to a snowy plain. She was returning to where she was awaited, to Aunt Gwen. Gwen was not her biological mother, but she became the closest person. Young, cheerful, kind-hearted, with a smile that could warm even the coldest day. She never married, never had children, and gave all her love to her niece. And Serena grew up in that house, full of laughter, fresh milk, forest berries, and winter evenings by the stove. But with each passing year, she felt more and more drawn beyond the village. She dreamed of the city, a life with bright lights, new people, and big dreams. When she turned 16, Gwen chose a transport and river affairs technical school for her. "A cook is always in demand, Serena," she said. "People may give up anything, but not food." Serena didn't object. The main thing was to leave. And then, in that city, she met him. Mark. He was 5 years older than her. A marine engineer. A guy with dreams, strong hands, and a smile that could melt ice. They met at a New Year's party at the technical school, music, lights, the sparkling glow of the garlands. "Do you dance?" he asked, extending his hand. "Depends on who with," Serena smiled. They danced, then drank hot tea in the dorm room, talking about everything. "You're so beautiful," he said. At that moment, she laughed. At that time, she thought happiness would be forever. "Mom," Alice's voice brought her back to the present. The line at the ticket counter was moving. "I thought my home was where Mark was. Where our family was. Where we were together. But everything fell apart. Now my home is back where I once grew up. And now my daughter and I are returning to the place I've tried so hard to escape." The train rocked steadily. In the shabby carriage, only a few passengers. Serena sat by the window, watching the gray fields rush by. Alice had settled beside her, propping her cheek with her little fist, her eyes already heavy with sleep. Serena stroked her daughter's hair, but her thoughts were far away. How did this happen? When did her marriage crack? At first, everything was fine. She and Mark got married right after finishing their studies. Serena remembered their tiny rented apartment, the first one they had rented together. Nothing extra. And the kettle on the stove. But they were happy. She got a job, and he went on long trips. Every time he returned, it felt like a celebration. They talked all night, ate dumplings straight from the pot, laughed at the little things. Then she got pregnant. When Serena told him she was expecting, Mark was initially happy. He lifted her up, spun her around the room. A daughter or a son, it doesn't matter. The main thing is that the baby is healthy. But something changed. At first, she didn't notice. Then she realized Mark began coming home less often. First, he was staying late at work. Then, he was going on trips more often. And when he came back, he seemed to pull away. "You're not helping at all," Serena said to him one day when Alice was 3 months old. "What can I do?" he snapped. "She just cries and doesn't understand anything." Serena brushed it off then. Fatigue, too much work, fatherhood was difficult for him. But it wasn't about work. He simply didn't want to be a father. Serena began to notice the first warning signs. One time, his shirt smelled of someone else's perfume, not like her own. She asked him about it, but he just brushed it off. Someone walked by at work. Maybe it rubbed off. Then, lipstick marks on his collar. Serena didn't want to believe it at first. But one day, Rachel, her friend, told her directly. "Listen, Serena. He's seeing someone else. Stop talking nonsense. I saw him in a cafe with another woman." Serena's breath caught in her throat. "Are you absolutely sure? Maybe they're just colleagues?" They were together. The woman's name was Wendy. She worked as a cook on the ship where Mark was stationed. Bright, well-groomed, confident. Serena kept hoping until the last moment that it wasn't true. But then Mark admitted it himself. "Serena, I love someone else," he said calmly, as if he were saying he had bought a new jacket. "We have a daughter," her voice trembled. "So what? She's your child." "Mark, I don't know how to be a father," he shrugged indifferently. Serena looked at him and didn't believe it. This wasn't the man she had married. When had he become so distant? That night, she lay awake for a long time, listening to her daughter's steady breathing in the crib. Then she got up and walked to the living room. Mark was asleep on the couch. This was their last night together under one roof. The next day, he left and never came back. The train slowed down. Soon, the station appeared. Serena shook her head, pushing the memories away. "Sweetheart, we're almost there," she whispered to Alice. Alice tiredly nodded, yawned, and snuggled up to her mother. The night was chilly, and ahead of them was the old house. A house that would now be their only refuge. The station greeted them with a deserted platform and a cold wind, smelling of damp earth and autumn's moisture. The train shuddered, almost as if saying goodbye, and slowly rolled away, disappearing into the darkness. Serena struggled to lift the heavy suitcase, holding Alice's hand firmly in her other. The little girl sleepily shuffled beside her, shivering in the cold. "Mom, is it still far?" she asked, pulling the sleeves of her jacket over her frozen hands. "No, darling. I'll call a car now," Serena said quietly, trying to keep her voice calm. But inside, everything was trembling. She looked at the empty platform, the old wooden benches, the trash bins where discarded cigarettes were still smoldering, and felt an emptiness forming inside her. Everything here was the same as it had been 10 years ago, and yet so foreign. She had returned to her hometown, a place she had sworn never to return to. Serena couldn't remember how they ended up in the kitchen. But the last scene replayed in her mind. She stood, holding onto the back of the chair. Mark was opposite her. He didn't even try to look guilty. "Did you sign the papers giving up your rights to Alice?" she asked slowly, as if she didn't believe it herself. "Yes. It's just a piece of paper." He said it as if he had been asked to sign some routine office paperwork. Serena swallowed hard. "Are you serious?" "It'll be easier this way," he shrugged. "You wanted me to pay alimony." It's better if I sign away my rights so you don't come back to me with demands later. Her voice broke. She wanted to scream. She wanted to hit him in the face, throw something at him. But inside, there was nothing. Mark, she's your daughter. Serena, stop, he sighed tiredly. I don't know how to be a father. I never wanted to be one. You know that. She knew. She had always known. That he wasn't interested in playing with Alice. That he didn't hug her in the mornings. That he avoided conversations about school, childhood illnesses, cartoons. But it was one thing to suspect. And another to hear it to your face. You don't know how much this hurts, she whispered. You'll manage, he said calmly. You'll manage. As if she had simply lost her job, not been left alone with a child. Without support. Without a home. Without a husband. Mark stood up, walked to the cupboard, took out an envelope, and threw it on the table. Here, he said. Money. Serena didn't even look at the envelope. You're destroying everything. And you think money can replace it? A family? Is that all you can give? She wanted to say that he could give much more. That Alice didn't need his handouts, she needed a father. But she knew he wouldn't understand. He had already made his choice. And it seemed like he didn't regret it at all. Serena took the suitcase and silently left the apartment, slamming the door behind her. They didn't speak again. She snapped back to reality when the old, worn-out truck drove up to the platform. The driver poked his head out the window. Serena? Yes, it's me. Well, look at you. Been years. I recognized you right away. She smiled weakly. Hi, Uncle Mark. Aunt Gwen said you'd be coming. She got everything ready, warmed up the house. He helped her load the suitcase into the car. Thanks, she whispered as she sat next to her mother. Serena looked out the window as the dark fields, scattered streetlights, and familiar outlines of houses passed by. And suddenly, she felt an overwhelming exhaustion. All the emotions, all the tears she had been holding back for so long, suddenly weighed down on her like a heavy burden. But she didn't cry, she simply closed her eyes and took a deep breath. Now, she had no past. Only the future. The old wooden gate creaked when Serena pushed it. The yard of her childhood home greeted her with cold silence, the smell of damp firewood and stove smoke. A warm light burned in the window. Aunt Gwen was waiting. We're home, she whispered to her daughter, but the words sounded unfamiliar. The house, after all these years, the log cabin, was still her refuge. Mom, I want to sleep, Alice yawned, dragging her small backpack behind her with difficulty. Soon, darling. We'll lie down shortly. Serena climbed onto the porch and knocked on the door. But Gwen was already opening it, looking at her anxiously. Finally. It was as if something inside had broken, and Serena pressed herself against her aunt, burying her forehead into her shoulder. It's over. I'm here. Gwen patted her hair, then noticed Alice. Oh, my girl, how you've grown. Come in quickly, it's warm inside. The warm light of the lamp, the smell of potatoes and milk, the creaking floorboards, it all felt so familiar and forgotten. Sit down, eat. You probably haven't eaten anything since yesterday. Gwen quickly set a plate in front of Serena. Serena just smiled. I'll eat later. Alice, let me tuck you in. But before she could stand, something caught on the hem of her coat. Something small, dirty, with trembling hands. She flinched and looked down. There, at her feet, holding onto her bag, stood a boy, dirty, ragged, frightened. He was about 5 years old, no older. His disheveled hair stuck up in clumps, and his big brown eyes stared up at Serena. She froze. "Don't turn me away," he whispered. She stared at the child, unable to believe her eyes. Where did he come from? The boy was clutching her coat as though his life depended on it. "Who are you?" Serena asked cautiously. "Justin," he mumbled, his voice trembling. "I have nowhere to go." "Ah," Serena slowly crouched in front of him, looking into his frightened face. "Are you alone? Where's your mom?" "I don't have a mom," he swallowed hard. I was on the train. My aunt said we were going on a trip. But she went to get lemonade and didn't come back." Serena furrowed her brow. "What aunt? A nanny?" He looked at her as if checking whether he could trust her. "She said we were going on an adventure, but I was left alone." A cold chill ran through her. The boy had been abandoned. Alone in a strange city. No money, no documents, no home. Gwen clutched her head. "Oh my God. What are we going to do?" Serena looked at the boy, and she understood that she already knew the answer. She couldn't just close the door and say it wasn't her problem. She took him by the shoulders and whispered, "Are you hungry?" Justin nodded. And Serena handed him a spoon. "Then eat first. And then we'll figure out what to do." He eagerly grabbed the spoon and began to eat hastily, as though afraid someone would take the food away from him. Serena sighed, watching him. He ended up with her. But maybe it wasn't a coincidence. The boy ate quickly, swallowing chunks of food as if he hadn't eaten in days. Serena silently watched him until Alice, already in her pajamas, sat down next to her and yawned. "Mom, who's that?" she asked sleepily, eyeing the little guest. Serena ran her hand through her daughter's hair. "This is Justin. He's going to stay with us for a while." Justin looked up at her, frightened, but grateful. Aunt Gwen stood nearby, frowning. "Are you sure? This isn't a toy, it's someone else's child. Do you even understand what will happen if they're looking for him?" Serena took a deep breath. "I can't throw him out, Aunt." "Where would he go?" Hearing this, Justin squeezed her coat even tighter. "I don't want to go to the police," he whispered. "They'll send me to an orphanage." Serena felt something stir inside her. She looked at the boy, skinny, tired, with the eyes of an adult, and understood he no longer believed anyone could protect him. "Calm down, Justin. No one's going to take you anywhere," she said softly. He nodded, but clearly didn't fully believe it. "All right," muttered Gwen. "He needs a bath. He's as dirty as a forest spirit." Serena smiled. "Justin, let's go wash you, and then sleep." The water in the bath quickly became murky. Serena carefully lathered him, trying not to make any sudden movements. He sat motionless, only flinching occasionally. "Is it warm?" she asked. He nodded, without lifting his eyes. She took a towel and wrapped him in it. Now bedtime. Alice was already asleep, curled up on her side of the bed. Serena laid Justin down beside her. "Make yourself comfortable." He cautiously lay down, pulled the blanket over himself, and exhaled. "Thank you," he said so quietly that Serena barely heard. She smiled. "Sleep, Justin. Tomorrow we'll figure it out." When Serena returned to the kitchen, Aunt Gwen was already waiting. "Well, tell me," she said sternly. Serena shrugged. "I don't know, Aunt. He just showed up." He was holding onto my suitcase like it was a lifeline. You do understand that now you're responsible for him? Serena nodded. Yes. Do you even have any idea who his parents are? Serena thought for a moment. He said his nanny took him on a trip and then disappeared. Suspicious, Gwen muttered. Serena took a sip of tea and looked out the window. Tomorrow, I'll try to find out more. Gwen sighed. You've always had a big heart, Serena. But don't get yourself into trouble. Serena smiled sadly. It seemed trouble had already found its way into her home. Serena woke up from some cautious movement next to her. She opened her eyes, saw Justin. He was sitting on the edge of the bed, wrapped in a blanket, silently staring out the window. Did you not sleep? She asked, sitting down beside him. The boy shook his head. I was afraid they'd leave me again, he quietly admitted. Serena felt a tightness in her chest from pity. She took his hand. Justin, I won't leave you. He looked at her for a long time, then carefully nodded. Okay. They had breakfast in silence. Aunt Gwen, grumbling, piled up a mountain of pancakes for Justin, but he ate every last crumb. When the plates were empty, Serena finally decided to learn the truth. Justin, tell me about your parents. The boy froze. I only have a dad. I don't remember my mom. And where is he? Justin lowered his head. He's in Moscow. He's rich. But I'm not needed by him. Serena frowned. Why do you think that? Justin pressed his lips together. He's always working. I hardly see him. Serena felt a surge of bitter understanding in her chest. Another father who had abandoned his child. Who took you away? She asked gently. The nanny. Her name was Betty. She said we were going on a trip. But then she went to get lemonade and didn't come back. Serena glanced at Aunt Gwen. She sighed. There's something not right here. After breakfast, Serena sat Justin down on the couch and opened her laptop. What's your dad's name? The boy hesitated but then quietly said, George Miller. Serena froze. The name seemed familiar to her. She quickly typed it into the search bar. A multitude of links appeared. George Miller, owner of a fast food restaurant chain, one of the most successful businessmen in the country. Serena blinked in disbelief. This man, was he really his father? She looked at Justin. Now she understood why he had such sharp features, why he spoke so clearly. He really was from a wealthy family. He had been abandoned. But she didn't know what to do next. One thing was clear, Justin wasn't just a lost child. He was someone's heir. Serena sat in front of the laptop, staring at the picture of George Miller, feeling a strange sensation growing in her chest. This man, he was Justin's father. On the screen, there was a tall man in his 40s with graying hair, slightly slanted eyes, and a confident gaze. Owner of the largest fast food restaurant chain, the article read. Serena looked at Justin again. Is this really your dad? The boy nodded. There's the same burger in his office, he pointed to the screen. Serena thought for a moment. This man doesn't even know his son is lost. Or maybe he just isn't looking for him. Justin, tell me everything from the beginning, she quietly asked. The boy was silent for a moment, then sighed. I lived in a big house, he began. But I rarely saw my dad. He was always working. Serena nodded. Who was with you? Grandpa and Grandma. They loved me, but then they left. Serena furrowed her brow. Why? Grandpa got sick. The doctor said he needed to live by the sea. He and Grandma moved. And your dad? Justin shrugged. He hired a nanny, Betty. Yeah, she was nice. We walked, read books, but then she started getting nervous. Nervous? Serena asked. Justin nodded. She said she had to leave urgently and offered me an adventure. Serena felt a cold shiver run down her spine. Did she kidnap you? Justin thought for a moment. She didn't say we were running away. She just packed up one day and bought a ticket. Then we were on the train. She said she was going to get lemonade. His voice trembled. But she didn't come back. Serena looked at Aunt Gwen. This sounds like kidnapping. Gwen sighed heavily. We'll somehow get in touch with his father. Serena pressed her lips together. What if he's not looking for his son? What if he's a normal person? He's looking for him, Gwen said firmly. Serena opened George Miller's company website and found the contact email. Her fingers trembled as she typed. Hello. This information may seem strange to you, but I have your son. He went missing a few days ago. He's alive and well, but he's afraid he's not being looked for. If this is a mistake, I apologize. But if not, please contact me. She attached a photo of Justin, sighed, and hit send. Now, all that was left was to wait. Less than 2 hours later, the phone rang. An unfamiliar number. Serena picked up the receiver. Hello? Where is he? The voice was hoarse, strained. Are you George Miller? Where's my son? Serena closed her eyes. He's with me. He's safe. She heard a sigh of relief on the other end of the line. I'm on my way. The call ended. Serena looked at Justin. Your dad is coming for you. The boy tensed up. Is he happy? Serena stroked his head. Very. But inside, she had doubts. If this man was so rich, why had his son ended up alone? And why did his nanny run away? Serena felt that the mystery wasn't over yet. She stood by the window, watching as a black SUV drove up to the house in the dark. The headlights illuminated the outlines of the night. Gwen nervously wrung her hands. He's nervous, Serena said quietly, though she didn't fully understand why her voice was trembling. The driver jumped out first and opened the back door. George Miller stepped out of the car, tall, broad-shouldered, in a dark coat. His face was tense, and in his eyes was something wild, resembling despair. He quickly walked toward the porch but stopped when he saw Serena. Where is he? He asked hoarsely. Serena didn't answer. She simply stepped aside. Justin peeked out from behind her. George froze. Justin. The boy hesitantly took a step forward. Dad? George stepped toward him, and in the next second, Justin pressed himself against him, hugging his neck and burying his face in his shoulder. Serena felt something stir inside her. You really came? Justin hugged him tighter. Of course, kiddo, George embraced his son as though he feared losing him again. Serena silently watched them. She had expected to see a rich, cold businessman. But in front of her was a father, afraid that he had lost his son forever. About 10 minutes later, they were sitting in the house. George didn't let go of Justin's hand, as though afraid the boy would disappear again. Serena set a cup of tea in front of him. How did you lose him? George ran a hand across his face. I don't know, his voice was hoarse. I was on a business trip. I thought he was with the nanny. Then I got a call and was told he was gone. Betty disappeared. He gritted his teeth. With the money. Serena clenched her fingers. She used the child. I'll find her, George said. His voice was firm, cold. Serena suddenly realized this man didn't forgive mistakes. I'm grateful to you, his gaze softened. You saved my son, George said. Serena shrugged. I just couldn't leave him. George looked at Justin. We're going home. The boy pressed his lips together. I don't want to. Serena sharply looked at him. Justin. George furrowed his brows too. What are you doing? Justin didn't look at him. I don't want to be alone again. George turned pale. Serena felt herself hold her breath. This wealthy, influential man had just heard the most painful thing a father could hear. His son was afraid to be with him. Justin, George ran his hand through the boy's hair. I want to stay with Aunt Serena, Justin said quietly. He looked at Serena. She froze. So did George. What would he do now? George Miller looked at his son as if he didn't recognize him. Justin, his voice was muffled, strained. You know I love you. The boy lowered his head. Then why didn't you look for me sooner? Those words seemed to hit George harder than any accusation. Serena stood nearby, unsure what to say. She felt like an outsider in this emotional storm, yet at the same time, she knew, over the past few days, this boy had become dear to her. Justin, I did look for you, George said quietly. But I thought you were safe. I didn't know Betty had abandoned you. You're always working, Justin said, lifting his head stubbornly. But Aunt Serena was with me. George said nothing. Serena swallowed hard. Justin, she said gently, your father was worried. He came to find you. And then he'll leave again. The boy clenched his fists. And I'll be alone again. George ran his hand over his face. I can't leave you here, he said finally. Can I come with you? Justin asked suddenly. Serena flinched. George looked at her in surprise. Aunt Gwen shook her head. Well, Serena. It seems fate has made its choice. Serena took a deep breath. I can't. Why not? Justin was looking at her. There was hope in his eyes. Serena looked at George. He's your father. And I need you, George said firmly. She blinked. Something in his gaze made her heart race. Justin's attached to you. I can't force him to leave if he's afraid. But I can ask you to come with us. The silence in the room became almost tangible. Serena felt her chest tighten. You're asking me to come along? To help Justin? She looked at the boy. He was staring at her pleadingly. How could she say no? But could she really leave with this man? George was waiting for her answer. Serena felt like the world had stopped spinning. George Miller, powerful and wealthy, was sitting across from her in an old country house and asking her to go with him. She glanced at Justin. He looked at her with hope, but not demand, rather, understanding. This is unexpected, Serena said at last, looking at George. For me too, his voice was low, steady. But my son has chosen you. She swallowed. It's not that simple. I'm not saying you have to decide right now, he said. But I can't leave Justin here. And he doesn't want to leave without you. Serena closed her eyes. All her life she tried to be strong and independent. After the divorce, she had sworn she'd never again let someone else make decisions for her. But now, it wasn't just her life at stake. She looked at Justin. This boy had become part of her heart in just a few days. Could she abandon him? No. She took a deep breath. All right, she said. George tilted his head slightly. Does that mean you agree? Serena nodded. I'll go. Justin lifted his head, then suddenly threw his arms around her. Thank you. George watched them. There was something strange in his eyes, almost warm. Then start packing, he said. We're leaving tomorrow morning. Serena stepped outside, breathing in the cool air. Aunt Gwen followed, arms crossed over her chest. Are you sure, Serena? Serena nodded. Yes. Gwen sighed heavily. You have a kind heart, girl. Just don't forget about yourself. Serena smiled. Thank you, Aunt Gwen. She hugged her, then added, I'm proud of you. Serena felt warmth bloom in her chest. She wasn't alone anymore, now she had a future. Early the next morning, they left. George insisted the driver take them straight to the airport. Justin held Serena's hand the entire way, while she tried to come to terms with the fact that she was leaving her old life behind. When they boarded the plane, Serena stared out the window, barely able to believe this was happening. Just a week ago, she'd been struggling with her divorce. Now, she was flying toward a new life with a boy she'd known for less than 10 days, and his father, a man she didn't know at all. George's house turned out to be enormous, more of a mansion. Everything inside was decorated with impeccable taste, spacious rooms, warm lighting, soft carpets. But despite the luxury, Serena noticed the house felt empty, as if something essential was missing. Welcome home, she said as they entered. Justin immediately ran off to explore the rooms. Serena stayed in the hallway, unsure of what to say. It's beautiful, she murmured. It's just a house, George replied dryly. What matters is whether it feels right inside. Serena nodded. He looked at her. You and Justin, will you need a room here? Serena gave him a cautious look. Don't you think all of this is a little strange? George smirked. It is. But when my son asks for help, I'll do whatever it takes to make him happy. Serena's heart tightened. This man appeared stern and cold, but he was willing to do anything for Justin. She nodded. All right, let's start from here. George looked at her. Yes. Let's. The next morning, Serena woke in a large room with panoramic windows. It all felt unreal. She stepped into the hallway and heard Justin's voice. He was laughing. Serena peeked into the living room and saw him playing with his father. George was tossing him in the air, catching him, spinning him around, and in his eyes was a joy so genuine it made Serena freeze. This man loved his son, he had just never known how to show it before. Serena took a deep breath. She felt like her life was just beginning. A week passed. Serena was slowly adjusting to her new life. It still felt like another world, a spacious house, a caring nanny, breakfast always ready, staff who bowed respectfully as she walked by. But the biggest surprise was Justin's transformation. He was happy. Every morning, he woke up with a smile, ran to hug her at breakfast. But most importantly, he was no longer afraid of his father. One evening, Serena entered George's study to talk. He was at his desk, reviewing documents, but as soon as he saw her, he set them aside. How's Justin sleeping? She asked with a smile. George rubbed his face tiredly. He's changed, he said softly. Serena nodded. Because now he knows he's not alone. George looked at her. That's because of you. Serena looked away. It's because you gave him a chance. He smiled, a real smile, for the first time. Will you stay? The question hung in the air. Serena looked into his eyes. She already knew the answer. Yes. The family they built. A month passed. Serena no longer felt like a stranger here. She had become part of their lives. And when, one day, Justin ran up to her and whispered "Mom," she knew she was no longer just a guest. She was his mother. George embraced her, and in his eyes, she saw what she never expected: love. Unexpected, deep, and real. Serena no longer felt like she needed to search for anything. She had found a family, a home, and love. And now, this was her life. Justin was no longer afraid of being left alone, because now he had a real family, and they lived happily ever after. This touching and heartfelt story shows that family isn't always about blood, it's about the people who choose to stay, no matter what.